Hello, everybody, wherever you are in the world. This is Tech Vision from the Ojo Yoshida Report. We've got a great guest today, and he's going to be talking about, I think I described the company as an unorthodox company in the semiconductor industry, but only just for today. Over the course of the last several years, Rapidus, that's the name of the company, has been taking steps that's turning it into the orthodox company in the semiconductor industry. And this conversation is to talk about that vision that got Rapidus started, and also then where the company is now and where it's headed. So the best person who can help us tell the story, he's joining us from the US. Henri Richard is general manager of Rapidus Design Solutions. And Henri, welcome to the Tech Vision chat with Mike and Bola.
Balaji, thank you, Mike. Thanks. Great pleasure to be with you this morning.
Okay, this is how we're going to do this. We want this to be a conversation, and we want this to be a discovery of Rapidus. But I'd like to start from your position. So how did you end up at Rapidus? What's your background? Tell us about yourself and how you ended up. You are heading Rapidus in the US, I think, right?
That is correct, yes. And since it's a conversation, let me start with a story, if I may. So,
Please.
I'm what people call a veteran of the semiconductor industry. I've been in this business for the last 30 years, based in Silicon Valley. And I happily retired at the beginning of the pandemic. Of course, at the time of my retirement announcement, I didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. So I found myself locked up at home, not being able to travel. I ended up working for Gartner. I'm sure you know the firm. I was in their sales consultancy practice. So I kept active through the years of the pandemic. And, of course, I had a lot of friends in Silicon Valley, and I was sitting down with them, and themes were emerging slowly but surely out of the conversation. The first theme was that thanks to the great success of the giant in this industry of foundry semiconductor, the dependency of customers on one company became increasingly a concern. Yes, it's a great company. They're executing extremely well, but it's really concentrating a lot of the power in one set of hands. And that was combined with, kind of sporadic shortage of supply. The big winners like NVIDIA, are basically consuming more chips than anybody can even dream of. And so there was a general concentration and shortage challenge in the industry that was increasingly common in the conversation. The second conversation was more of a geopolitical nature, which is it was very clear that the United States was on a collision path with China. And that creates a whole set of issues. Of course, at the time, we weren't talking about tariffs, so the subject is even more relevant today. But still, there was this concern, right? And then the third theme was that the industry structure was changing. And what I mean by that is that with the emergence of AI, and then now the explosion of AI, there were a lot of companies that were in need of semiconductor, but that don't want to be semiconductor companies.
Right.
Their expertise is in the models, is in the, so I'm not going to say that semiconductor are a necessary evil. That's maybe a bridge too far, but it's certainly not part of what they will consider their core competency. However, while many of those start with what we call a bag of parts that NVIDIA leading the industry has put together, and that helps them, kind of get off the ground, they often realize that later in the stage of their development, a more purpose-built chip is going to serve their needs better from a cost standpoint, from a performance standpoint, optimization, and so forth. That led to the structure of the industry changing from, when I was at AMD or at Freescale, basically you had, a few big players that had big programs that you would make millions and millions and millions of chips of. Now, you have a lot more programs with much smaller volumes and a very fast pace of innovation where you might have a version of the chip coming out every 12 to 18 months because you're constantly optimizing. So those were, slowly but surely in those conversations, as I was kind of semi-retired with my friends in the semiconductor industry in the Valley, the topics that we were discussing. And then one day, I get a phone call from a good friend of mine, Dr. Siva Sivaram, who's was, at SanDisk. At the time I was at SanDisk, he was one of our chief technologists there. And he said, look, I don't know if you heard about this new venture in Japan, Rapidus, but our good friend, Koeki-san, is the CEO. And I think it would be a good idea for you two to have breakfast. And so, Koeki-san had a really great relationship from the time at SanDisk. At SanDisk, I was running worldwide sales, and he was basically running the joint venture fab between Toshiba and SanDisk in Yokkaichi. And so we met, and Koeki-san basically laid bare on the table the project with all the details and how the company was going to be different. And it struck me that it was almost eerie that he was addressing every one of those three main themes that I was just, kind of having a coffee and talking with my friends in Silicon Valley about relative to the semiconductor industry changing. So that's how I ended up here. I kind of came out of retirement and had the great privilege of working for Dr. Koeki-san and leading not only the US subsidiary in Silicon Valley, but really the marketing function worldwide.
Now, you used a phrase that I really want to explore further. You talked about the Rapidus project. Now, the foundation that you laid about what happened in the industry over the course of the last 5 years, I mean, it has accelerated even beyond what we were saying, during those times of shortages. But let's talk about the Rapidus project in that environment. So it's actually beyond what was happening. There's a project that's behind it. So let help us understand what that project was.
Yes. So what happened, we all know that many moons ago Japan was a force to reckon in logic semiconductor manufacturing, and then things happened and they basically exited that market. Now Japan always had a very strong presence in equipment manufacturing for semiconductor. Yes. And they also kept a presence in the memory, in solid state memory, but they had exited for all intents and purposes logic manufacturing. Koeki-san and Higashi-san, our chairman of the board and the former CEO of Tokyo Electron, got together in 2021 and thought that because of some of the changes I was describing, it could be a good time to bring Japan back into logic, advanced node logic semiconductor manufacturing. And I think they thought of that from two angles. One, there was an inflection point in the industry where everybody had to move away from FinFET and go to GAA. And that was a good insertion point to re-enter the market. There were those changes structurally in the industry that offered maybe a newcomer an opportunity to differentiate from the established player. And then, of course, there was that geopolitical tension. And so combine that with the fact that Koeki-san, for years and years, has written about a different way to run a semiconductor fab. It was actually the subject of his PhD. And last but not least, that in today's modern world, one could say that AI and advanced logic chip manufacturing is not just a technology, it's a matter of national security. And so, all this came together, and because of their just great credibility and connection in Japan, they were able to convince the government and private investors to fund this incredible new challenge of putting in Chitose a 2-nanometer advanced manufacturing facility.
The fascinating thing about is we're talking about a period of just 4 years, if that. That's it. And in 4 years, at the time when Rapidus was announced, I have to tell you, I was a skeptic. I was like, really? This is not going to happen. And then over the years, I watched, and it's been happening. So, what made it come together so quickly, and where are you at now? Mike, chip in
Well,
anytime, please.
obviously, the name of the company says it all, right? Rapidus.
Right.
It's about being quick. And you're right. You're right, Bolaji. I'm amazed. I visited Chitose recently. To think that at the end of 2023, you had a big field of grass. By the way, the site is bigger than Tokyo Disneyland. Um, there was just grass, and today we have the fab is almost completed. And certainly, the pilot production side of the fab is completed. It's just amazing. But that proves that some of the values that we all know that are traditional in Japan, which is discipline of execution, focus, quality, still exist. So, you asked where are we today? Well, we broke probably a bunch of world records in putting this facility together. We installed our EUV, our most advanced ASML EUV machine in December, on actually the 25th of December. It was a Christmas Day present from our friends at ASML. We start exposing wafers on EUV on April 1st, which is also a record. Typically people would tell you that install an EUV machine is a 5 to 6 months process. And we intend to start pilot production testing this month. So that means that we have over 200 machines that have been installed already in the pilot production area of the fab. So, quite an incredible journey. I mentioned how big the site is. I would tell you that our clean room is bigger than the Tokyo Dome. And I would tell you that the fab uses more steel than the famous Tokyo Tower. So it gives you a sense of the scale. This is a mega fab in a place that is quite amazing. And there is a concept, I don't know if you heard about it, but we're basically helping nucleate and crystallize the concept of Hokkaido Valley, which is a take on Silicon Valley, right? Because this is an area where you have excellent power, clean water, great universities, and quite a beautiful environment. It is of course cold and snowy in the winter if you're a sneeze, but it's also very nice in the summer. And then last but not least, the food is exceptional, and we all have had lots of great seafood from Hokkaido. So Rapidus is more than just the return of Japan to advanced logic manufacturing. It's more than just a very significant government-funded project. It is also the resolve of an entire country to get back into a place where they can make a difference, and with a very, very advanced and powerful tool through Rapidus.
One thing that Rapidus did that I found admirable, they didn't just depend on Japanese technology, Japanese expertise, and all of that. You went outside of Japan too. You had, and you still have this great relationship with IBM. Tell us about that, because we're going to move into the issue of the design solutions that you're providing.
Sure.
But this lays the foundation for what Rapidus is today. Like you said, the company moved rapidly. The backing of the Japanese government, all of the private companies in Japan, but also even external partners.
Yeah, so I didn't mention it, but I'm an ex-IBMer, and as you know, when you work for that company, there's always a piece of your heart that stays with it. So I'm very happy to be part of Rapidus for a lot of reasons. One of them is that joint development agreement that we have with IBM. I just visited Albany recently, and it's great to be able to talk to ex-colleagues at IBM. So you're correct. We partner with IBM for the core technology, the GAA 2 nanometer technology and process. We actually sent over 150 engineers to Albany. We started to repatriate some of these as we're ramping up the pilot production in Chitose, and we'll continue to partner with IBM. the reason we selected their technology is because they've been working on GAA for quite a while, and we believe that there are choices that they've made in the process that make it particularly high performance and small size with very interesting leakage characteristics. So we felt that that was the right process to partner and bring into our fab. But we also have a relationship with Fraunhofer, and Koiki-san always stresses the fact that yes, this is a Japanese company with a fab in Hokkaido, but it's really a global project with many different partners around the world. We have partnerships in India as well, and what we want is we want to bring an ecosystem together to help our end customers develop their chips. So of course, that takes the EDA vendors, and we've announced, that of course we've got partnership with Synopsys and Cadence. It takes, of course, people like ARM, because we know that a lot of and RISC-V. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that need to come together if you want to be able to serve your customers. And then there's also, of course, Design House. We've announced a relationship with Quest Global, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of customers today don't want to design the chip, or at least they might design the small portion of it that is their secret sauce, and then for everything else, they want to outsource it if possible. So it is great to see that coming. And you were asking, so what is Rapidus Design Solution? Well, Rapidus Design Solution is the subsidiary based in Silicon Valley of Rapidus Corporation that handles all of the customer technical and commercial relationships, that fosters the ecosystem development because most of the partner, if not all of them, are in Silicon Valley. And we have been really encouraged by the reception that we've had, because of those trends that I was talking about. And I really look forward to, a big moment for us, which is the inauguration of our facility that will take place in the middle of July. That's kind of when we're coming out of the shadows, Balaji, and we'll show to everybody that the dream is a reality.
It is a reality. Mike, I thought you had a question there.
No. You're doing great, Balaji.
Oh, all right. So Henri, let me ask about this. I think I may be wrong, but did you also have, or did you bring on board Tenstorrent? Did you do anything with Tenstorrent?
Of course, yeah. Jim Keller's company is very interesting to us. We have announced a relationship with Tenstorrent. We've announced, we have a lot of relationship. We tend to not talk about our customers. They don't like it, and it's not needed. So I'm not going to go into any details, other than, of course, this is a public information. We felt very early on, and I think Jim equally felt that this was an interesting opportunity for partnership. We like what they're doing, and where they're focused at, and so we hope that this will yield many years of a successful partnership between the two of us.
One thing you said earlier on, so Rapidus is a Japanese company with its fab in Japan, but it is seen as, and it is considered, by the way, in the industry, folks that I spoke with in preparations for our discussion, they do see it as a Japanese company, but they don't see it as a Japanese player. Now, which is kind of interesting for me, and I'd like to find out, how did you so quickly establish that to the point where, there are potential customers that are saying, well, we will go with Rapidus once Rapidus is ready?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Actually, I have been very, I wouldn't say surprised, but very pleased with the reception of everybody we've talked to in Silicon Valley. So first, we never disclose any names, but we're talking to everybody. Second, I would say in general, and you as independent journalists can verify that, if you go off the record with a customer and say, what do you think about Rapidus? I think the general consensus is we would love for these guys to succeed. So, there's a lot of goodwill in the industry, because the reality is that there's room for another player, right? We know there's the big gorilla that's a great company that's executing extraordinarily well. Then you've got, Intel that's trying to separate their two business, but it's still an IDM. They have a captive demand. And then you've got Samsung that has the same situation. So in my mind, and really without being biased, I think you've got, TSMC, Rapidus, two fully independent foundry-only companies, and then you'll have Intel and Samsung that are, companies that have their own internal demand. And I think that's a good balance for the market. And I think everybody that's been, in this industry for a long time kind of recognizes that reality. Also, of course, Japan is a friendly country with the United States, and more than ever today, it's a very important topic. And then I haven't spoken yet about what makes us different and why people are so excited.
In a minute.
Because that's really, because your question was why people would consider Rapidus. So I think at a macro level, it's because, a game of four, each company having their strengths and weaknesses makes sense. And there's nobody in the industry that would say, why would I even talk to Rapidus? No, it makes sense. And we are representing the traditional values of Japan, which is dependability, quality, reliability. People know they can trust what we're going to commit. So that's been the backdrop. But then, of course, we're bringing a lot of differentiation.
You didn't just go for the old model, the old processes. I mean, the surprising thing was that Rapidus just went straight for the latest generation, the cutting edge processes. That's kind of also a surprise for me, because I thought, look, maybe you'll start small and then gradually go into it. But you are 2 nanometers already.
Yeah.
Why was that decision important to the company?
Because we really felt that GAA transition from FinFET was the right insertion point in the industry. And so, it didn't make any sense. Okay. I get the question a lot, are you going to make, 5 nanometer or 7 nanometer? And just let's be very clear. Right. No, never. That's not our plan. It's 2 nanometer onwards. And it's because of the insertion point of GAA, because in a way, everybody in the industry had to push the reset button moving from FinFET to GAA. And we felt that was the best chance for us to get to participate without, I would say the same hurdle that we would have had if we had to go on older technology. So that's why.
It also gives you an advantage, doesn't it, when you talk with customers?
Of course, because there is obviously always more tension at the leading edge node than at legacy nodes. It's a different business, and I have a lot of respect for the companies that are serving those legacy nodes. We know that, particularly in industrial and automotive application, you can use probably 90 nanometer for a long time if need be. It's a different business. We wanted to be at the bleeding edge because we really wanted to take advantage of the AI revolution. And those AI chips are really going to use those leading edge node. Also, frankly, with the trend of chiplets, that you can now blend leading edge with more legacy node,
right?
And that's one of our difference. We haven't talked about it because I've been focused on saying we're advanced logic manufacturing, but also I want to make sure that your readers know that we are integrating both the front end and back end process into the same fab. We will be able to separate the two, but if a customer wants to have a one-stop shop, we can take it from design all the way to tested chips. And
so you do the packaging too, then?
Yes, we'll be providing from flip chip BGA all the way to 3D packaging in the same facility. And we're about only a couple of miles away from Chitose Airport. So there's also a whole I'm going to come to it because, again, Rapidus, the name. But our intention is to really be world-class in terms of being able to integrate the whole process and deliver the chips very quickly.
Where are you finding people to execute all of this?
Very good question, Mike. I get that question a lot. So first, you have to understand that it's almost impossible to pick up a newspaper or open the TV in Japan and not see something about Rapidus, I would say, every week or every other week. So, of course, here in the US, and then for people like you that are very focused on this market, you know us, but in general, the general public doesn't know us, right? It's very different in Japan. Part of it is because of the amount of money that we got from the Japanese government, but part of it is because this is a matter of national pride. And Rapidus, I would say, will very quickly be in Japan a name that will be as well known as, let's say, Boeing or Walmart is here in the US. I mean, this is that big. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is because if you're a young engineer or a middle-aged engineer or even a retired engineer like myself in Japan, and you want to contribute to the semiconductor industry, Rapidus is definitely, if not top of the list, certainly top 3. So that's one part of the answer. The other answer is, as I mentioned earlier, while Japan exited the manufacturing of advanced logic, it never really was out of that market because of all the giants that they have in both equipment manufacturing and materials, right? Let's not forget that core materials for semiconductor manufacturing, Japan is still very, very strong. And basically, there is always some Japanese content in any advanced chip, no matter who makes it, TSMC, Intel, or Samsung. So there is a pool of very good engineering talent in Japan. And as a result, because of the prestige of the project and the coverage, we haven't had any issues with finding the talent in Japan. But we're not limited to Japanese national. And of course, we're welcoming people from whichever part of the world that they want to come and contribute to Rapidus.
Are you getting people from Silicon Valley to come to Japan and work in the fabs there?
Yes. As you know, there's been a little bit of turmoil with various players in this industry over the last few months. And so I would say spontaneous candidacy are plenty.
Let's talk about the design solutions business. I mean, I like you to break it down. When you just say Rapidus Design Solutions, for so many people, it can mean so many different things. So what's the package here?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. And I want to make sure that the name is not misleading. We are not a design house. We chose, Koiki-san and I chose that name because one of the founding elements of Rapidus is the desire to break the silos of design, front end, and back end. We believe that that's an old industry model, and that today, in particular, because some companies they need silicon, but they don't want to become silicon experts. You need to have a much more integrated communication system between the design portion of the chip, the manufacturing of the die, and the packaging. And as you know, packaging has now become often one of the bottlenecks in getting to good yields and good performance, right? So you can't ignore the back end like maybe it was the case years ago. So what's very important for us is to provide the customers with a development environment where the feedback from whatever we can find making the die or packaging the die goes back to the designers as quickly as possible, so that as we iterate generations of chip, we give them the best opportunity to enhance their design as quickly and as cost effectively as possible. So that's one dimension. Specifically, RDS will have the responsibility of taking a customer from the concept of their design all the way to production with us if they so choose. But we will not do design services. However, we'll have partners that we're able to bring to the table to help our customers with the design. So it is a sales and marketing and technical support organization that will serve the customers and ensure that the projects comes to reality. But we are not, despite our name, we're not a design house.
So in practice, does that mean that a customer would come to you with a chip design and then you would help them figure out how best to manufacture and package it?
Yes, exactly, Mike. What's happening is just in the last few weeks, I've had customers coming to me and let me summarize. They say, look, I don't want to be getting into the details of every aspect of the solution that I need. I would like to get into it as much as needed and as little as possible. Can you help me? So they're looking for more than somebody that can make the chip. They're looking for somebody to help them put together the set of partners to get to their successful outcome.
And I would assume that that means some detailed level of modeling that the company developing the chip needs to incorporate into their design process.
Yes, we're going to offer pretty advanced AI tools, AI-based tools for customers to model and test and simulate, of course. I'm sure some of your readers will say, well, there's nothing new here. I mean, others are already doing this. I mean, you can go and ask for a lot of help from some of our competitors to get your chip done. So I don't want to claim something completely new, but what I think we're going to try to do a little bit different is how we bring everyone together, and more importantly, the speed at which we can go and provide feedback directly from the manufacturing back to the design. And there's a whole concept of manufacturing for design, which is different from design for manufacturing. And we're pushing that concept and explaining to clients how we believe we have a differentiated solution in that regard.
When you look at the ecosystem, initially when Rapidus was launched, my first thought was, okay, it's actually going to be a semiconductor vendor. But based on what you're saying now, Rapidus is not going to be competing with its own customers.
No, absolutely not. We have no intention to compete with our customers. And, our objective is to bring our customers the tools that they need. And that's the amount of integration of services that we will provide. No more, no less.
So if you look at the customers that you're expecting in future, do you see them weighted towards one part of the world versus another?
Well, because we are at the leading edge node, the vast majority of the demand is in the United States and
Correct.
in Silicon Valley. There are projects outside of the US at 2 nanometer, but they're later in the game. We've made public that we will start mass production in 2027. And I would say, at the onset of mass production, the projects are all, US based. But there's, of course, some very interesting projects outside of the US that will potentially come to us later.
Henry, I have to say that sometimes when I think about Rapidus and the fact that you went 2 nanometers and all that stuff, I tell myself, these guys have a lot of balls, just jumping in, at the deep end and say, come on, we've got you covered. I mean, you talked about it earlier on, but there must be something that kind of gave you this feeling that the industry needs this and we can provide it.
I think that, no. Of course, there was a pretty careful market analysis, demand, supply, before the plan was approved. But as you and I know, having been in this industry for 30 years, it's if anything, it's unpredictable, right? I mean, the market. I always like to say the difference between allocation and oversupply is one wafer. So it's a very volatile market. But suffice to say that, in my opinion, the boom of AI and the demand for advanced chips, both in the data center, at the edge, and You know, I was at CES. I was at CES this year, and I mean, AI is going everywhere now. You know, we can discuss the business model and who's going to pay for it and whether it makes sense, and I don't want to get into whether it's great for the society or for the world or not. Those are philosophical discussions that are worth having. But from a business standpoint, it's very clear that the diffusion of AI is accelerating, and I think that a lot of analysts echo my sentiment that we don't know yet how big it's going to be. It seems to be very big. It could get a lot bigger, and so I feel confident about the level of demand over the next 5 years, maybe 5 to 10 years, and the fact that there's room for a new player in this industry, particularly because, as I said, we're going to be very different. And so that maybe gives me the chance to get into that topic, which is what's special about our fab is that it will run entirely on a single wafer processing model.
Explain that, please.
So, until now, in most fabs, you have a mixture of processing, a few wafers or a complete batch of 25 or 50 wafers. In traditional fabs up to today, the transport system is a linear transport system. So you take a bunch of wafer from one machine to the next, to the next, and the next. And so if you think about a linear loop, the one challenge that it creates is that if something stops, well, everything behind stops as well, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so
entire batch.
Right. So that's one element. I'll get back to that. Then the second thing is, you all know that with some of our competitors today, if you go and ask for a hot lot, which is kind of rushing your lot through the fab because you need it fast, you get a huge premium. And so we took the approach to say, well, why don't we make the entire fab hot lot? And to do that, we have a fab that's basically organized in a very different way. Our transport system is not a loop, it's a grid. Okay. Think of our fab more like an Amazon warehouse than a traditional semiconductor manufacturing line. We can take any wafer and move it to any machine. And so the machines are a little bit different. The transport system is quite unique, very, very special. And this will allow us to have a cycle time inside the fab that we believe can be better than 50% faster than the competition. So this is one of the key attributes of Rapidus.
Does that affect cost? Sorry, Henri. Does that affect cost or price for the customer?
So that's two different questions. Cost.
Okay.
There is, if you think about our fab and you now think that the machines don't have to be in a sequential order because we can move things anywhere. Our floor utilization is much more, I would say, efficient. The transport system allows us a lot of flexibility. Our downtime for maintenance and calibration is less than the competition. Our inventory in process in the fab is lower than the competition. So there's a lot of pluses in the financial column. There's also some minuses. The machines are a little bit more expensive because we had to have them tailored to that single wafer processing method. Net, from a cost standpoint, we are competitive. From a price standpoint, then it's a matter of, how much are the customers seeing value in that increased turnaround time, and how will they want to pay for it? And I don't want to get into pricing strategies, but we're very confident that what we've put together in Chitose is a leading edge, not only from a node standpoint, but really from a fab organization standpoint. And that's why we don't call it a fab. Koiki-san named it IIM, which is Innovative Integration for Manufacturing, right?
Right.
And that was to just underline the fact that we're a bit of a different animal when it comes to manufacturing semiconductor. And then now you add to that the fact that we have the back end on the same site. And so we don't have to fly wafers from one part of the world to another part of the world for an OSAT to finish the packaging. And I think you start to get the picture of why the name of the company is Rapidus.
Right. I think I have maybe one or two questions more, but one of them has to do about what the future holds now. You talked about AI, and you talked about the fact that we don't really know how it's going to shape out, but we know we can see the trend. We see. I was at Embedded World, and everybody wanted to talk about AI, even if it's AI at the edge. Same thing with Rapidus. It's been for getting on to 5 years now, and the question is, what do you see? What does the company see as its future in terms of who you're serving? You don't have to mention companies by names, but what does the future hold for Rapidus that you see ahead?
No,
What's that vision? That's the thing. What's that vision?
Yeah. One of the company's value is we obviously want to be a company that through the products that we will manufacture benefits society, Earth. We're very green. I mean, we're probably going to be also the leading edge in terms of lack of utilization of natural resources, renewable energy, and all of that, which are our themes that are pervasive in Japan, not just for semiconductor or Rapidus. So we do all of that. We have that I would say corporate responsibility to be absolutely best in class with regards to usage of natural resources for what we're going to do as a business. But your question goes beyond that. So first, while AI is going to be a very important factor of driving demand in our industry, it's not the only market that we will serve. And in fact, as the person in charge of the marketing strategy for the company, I want to make sure I've got a balanced approach, and that we obviously want data center based projects because those drive very large chips with good volumes. We probably will also serve more traditional semiconductor types. There's a increasingly difficult to define boundary between cars and smartphones. Is it a smartphone on wheel? And so there's a lot of interesting projects that combine the traditional automotive needs with a lot of AI. There's a lot of demand in communication, telecommunications, and then so we'll have what I hope to be a very balanced portfolio with regards to customers and markets and types of chips, right? But I do think that because our ability to have best-in-class turnaround time from chip conception to delivery of a working chip, of course, the AI market is going to be particularly interested in Rapidus because they are moving so fast, and so it'll be a balancing act. But we're looking at embedded computing. We're obviously going to be in the edge at the data center. I don't want you to walk away from this conversation thinking, okay, this is a bunch of guys that are going to focus only on the AI market. Not at all.
I guess the last question would be, when do you expect volume production to start?
Volume production is slated for the end of 2027. And, so that's when we'll start to ramp. And then, full capacity production will happen in 2028.
Do you have any things that you really would have liked to talk about that we didn't touch in this conversation, or notable points that you want to impress upon our listeners about Rapidus?
I mean, I think that, our industry has been fairly linear in how it does things over the last 10 to 15 years, maybe more. But, it was the race to go down each node.
Right.
But the advent of chiplets is changing the games fundamentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
The race to a smaller node has changed because the costs involved in developing 2 nanometer chips are skyrocketing. And so it is time, I think, for everyone in this industry to step back and think about the business models, the engagements, how do people collaborate? The model of designing front-end manufacturing, back-end manufacturing, all being in their own sphere, I think is going away. Just a little bit like monolithic computing, what I call brute force computing, right? We used to have, a couple of architectures, and software was helping them do everything. And now we're seeing more and more diversity in architectures, so that you're really focused on the workload for optimal performance. All of these things are coming together, and this fundamental change in the industry, where you're going to see a lot more projects of smaller volume, is going to force semiconductor manufacturing to change their mindset. And I believe that in that regard, while we are a new player and we are going to bring some specific differentiation, I think also, and I hope that over the months and years to come, you'll see us as trailblazers, not just in technology, but in business model, in really helping the clients and the ecosystem think about chip manufacturing in a different way. So yes, we're, as you say, we're a ballsy enterprise with some lofty goals, billions of dollars on the table to get to that. And that's an important part of what we are. But I also think that we're going to help the whole industry come to their senses with regards to how to do things differently, because brute force, which has been a lot of what has been done in the industry over the last 10 years, is probably getting to a diminishing return situation. And so you got to get smarter about how you design those chips, who's helping you do it, and who's doing what in the entire value chain.
This has been a really, really fascinating discussion. I'm really glad that you took the time to explain this, and it's really been a pleasure. I want to personally wish you good luck and success in this, and
Thank you.
I hope to revisit this in 6 months, and certainly by 2028.
Yes.
I am sure we'll have the opportunity to talk again, and I'm counting on you to keep my feet to the fire of the promises and statements that I've made. On behalf of everyone at Rapidus, really grateful for you taking the time, and stay tuned for some pretty nice innovation coming out of us.